Hello, everybody. Good morning. We are excited to be here, also a little bit nervous because this is a first for us to present in front of an audience like this, and also in not our mother language. So we have our homemade cards with texts, and bear with us, please. We are Machteld Oosterhof and Marianne Ravelli, and we are process analysts at the Internal Service Center of the Dutch Police. And the Dutch Police is the country's largest employer. About 65,000 plus people work for the Dutch Police. And we were introduced to process mining by my manager, who had seen the technology in action at her previous employer, the NS, or the Dutch Railway Company. And so we actually attended the process mining camp in 2019, and we got very inspired by everybody's stories here. And well, now we're back to share our own story and experiences with process mining and the revelations it provided about our way of thinking and approaching problems. We'll touch on the basics of the Dutch police organization, the way the HR back office is organized, which is where we work, and share some examples of our day-to-day HR processes, where process mining helped us in the analysis process. And finally, a few main takeaways. So talking about everything the police does will take forever. But as you can imagine, it includes ensuring order and safety within the country, preventing crime, detecting criminal offenses, and helping anyone in need. And personally, I'm quite inspired by our mission statement, which is we protect democracy under all circumstances. And the people who do this, who work for the police, are obviously quite special in the way that they possess the ability and the courage and the instinct to take a step forward where most people would take a step backward. And so the mission statement of the police center is to make good police work possible and to support our colleagues in the field so that they can do their day-to-day duty in a safe manner. So examples of the services and products that the services center provides is equipment, training, certification, psychological support, intelligence, networking, cars, phones, laptops, buildings, cafeterias, pretty much everything. The way we are organized is in 10 regional units in the country. So in 2015, we reorganized from 26 regional, pretty much separate companies to become one national police, which was a huge operation. And now we have these 10 regions, one national region, and the police services center in 3 locations of the country, which you can see on the map. We are located in Zwolle, Rotterdam, and here in Eindhoven. Now, this organizational structure is a huge oversimplification because we could never fit the entire thing on one PowerPoint sheet. But we're sticking to what's relevant to our story today. So the pretty violet-colored boxes is what we're talking about here. So we work for the service center, which consists of a few major units: IT, obviously, facility management, communication, finance, and finally, human resources management. And human resources management has a front office and a back office. And employees can enlist HR services through the self-service portal or through calling with the service desk if they have questions about legislation or benefits, or speaking with an HR representative face-to-face about any questions they might have. And we call it the click-call-face principle, although some colleagues have grown a little bit allergic to the term. That is because in the beginning, it was a huge operation to condense everything from separate regions into one big, large machine. So standardization was necessary. And that meant that also the colleagues, when they had an HR question, were encouraged to first look up the information on our intranets or ask their direct colleagues before finding a human resources colleague to help them. That was in the beginning. We found that it's not really realistic to ask a cop to do such a thing, to spend time on a computer and finding information. So once we got the basis established, we wanted to move on to improving our quality and performance of our processes, and so that we could invest our energy into more customer satisfaction, as we call them. So the HR back offices processes 230,000 requests every year. That's a lot of requests, and some examples of these processes are in onboarding, mobility, outflow, salary payment, etc. So the processes were supported by multiple systems rather than one core HR system, which complicated processes and blurred insight into what was actually happening. So, and the programs also didn't come with a dashboard to say anything about performance. So we had to build our own dashboards in Excel, as you do. And even with those dashboards, we didn't have enough information when we actually wanted to go and improve these processes, because all we knew was the beginning point and the end point, but not what happened in the steps between. So process mining technology provides a solution there. And when we were first established, the processes were highly dependent on employees with key knowledge, which is not necessarily a very desirable situation to be in, because we like to have very intelligent people, but we'd also like to make them move towards more data-driven process management. So we aim to combine the best of both worlds, and therefore we also need to change the way we work and the way we make decisions. And that's very much a change in culture and behavior, which is a slow process and takes a lot of time. And it's also, touching back on what Anne just explained, actually a multidisciplinary endeavor. So you have process mining experts who guide stakeholders towards better decision making and choosing the right interventions by tailoring the approach to fit the stakeholders' context and needs. And it requires a different kind of management and control. And involving people, we found, increases their understanding and support for the change. And besides, the data isn't everything. Like Anne just also explained, you need subject matter experts to interpret the data and establish the actual facts, discuss opportunities for improvement, and implement changes together. So the impact could be both in terms of an improved process as well as an improvement or a change in culture and behavior. Machteld will now share with you some examples from our day-to-day business in which we found that process mining could help us and help us find some very surprising conclusions in some situations.
Yes, thank you. So, I will take you to 3 examples about what we have done. And we look at them by 3 contradictions. Subjective versus objective, doing the things right or doing the right things. And the endless discussions that we had versus founded conclusions. I think that. Okay. Yes. First example is about RPU. RPU is a process. Oh, not so fast.
I'm sorry.
RPU is a process that makes it possible for our employees to work less hours when they reach the age of 55 or older, so that we can deploy them for longer and their knowledge and experience is not lost for the organization. You can see it as a kind of arrangement for potential retirement. And here you see the process and the steps that have been made to come to an RPU is that the employee submits a request, the manager has to approve it or rejects it, and then the HR administration processes the process into the systems and the personal file. And there was made an assumption that the decisions takes too long, longer than 8 weeks. In the government, we say we have to make a decision within 8 weeks, otherwise we can have to make to pay a fine or a fine. So they said it took too long, and they said to us, you have to encourage the HR employees to work faster and handle the cases faster. But in our organization, the manager is the person who may make the decision. So you can say, when he answers the request within that 8 weeks, he has a decision. So we looked at the step between the request and the decision of the manager. So we looked at that particular step, and what we saw is that all cases had a decision from the manager within that 8 weeks. So you could say that's on time. We even saw that the manager to make a decision within 3 days on average, so it's really fast. So we could say it's not true. We stop discussion about this. But the decision of the manager does not mean that the employee has formalization decisions in the personal file. So we also looked at the total process. And what we were seeing there is that the total process takes about 16 working days on average, so less than 8 weeks. But we also looked at the cases that didn't have a decision finalized in their personal file, and we saw that 3% of that cases didn't have that decision in the personal file. That's a small group, but we took it to the HR employees to ask what happened in that cases. And what we saw is that sometimes we couldn't handle the cases because of the calculations that have to be made. And sometimes the case took a little bit longer at the manager. An outlier took 52 days, so we almost reached that 8 weeks. Based on all that information, we said we don't do anything. We are not going to encourage the HR people to work faster. We stopped this discussion from escalating, and we're not going to work different. What we started was to determining the lead time for processes, inclusive the RPU, so that the HR employees have direction within the which period the cases must be handled, and the employee who has submitted the request knows what he can expect from the moment that the case reached at the HR administration. So that was the first example. The second example is something about saying about doing the right things versus doing the things right. He's a little bit slow.
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah. The process is called uploading certificates to the personal file. It makes it possible for the employee to add a certificate to his personal file by upload a certificate in the self-service system, and if the HR gets that document, we can make a decision what to do with it. We reject it, handle it, or return it. So what we did in this process, we not only marked the activity as an activity, but we also marked a button as an activity. As you can maybe see, we have 20,000 documents on an annual basis that were uploaded. And a manager within the HR administration said, it's so much work and a little to yield. Are we keep doing this, or can we do this differently? Because we want to reduce the simple, easy work, and we want to be more in touch with the other colleagues by the complicated processes. The HR employees, they said, no, it's so important that we are preventing the personal file from, even kijken, from vervuiling.
From getting polluted, I guess.
Yes,
Pollution.
that's the word. So they checked, is it in the right format, has it the correct name, and then chose what they do with it. When we put the data into the process mining tool, we saw that 14% of the cases weren't stored in the personal file. Based on that number only, we couldn't make a decision. It was too high to say we stop with it. So what we did was get in touch with the HR employees that handles this process and ask, what do you see for risk if the 14% anyway landed in that personal file? Well, they said it's wrong name, the wrong format, but our HR manager says that's not a risk big enough to employ 4 full-time units, because 4 full-time units were checking these documents. So we also talked to the users, like legal departments, the screening departments, and the HR advisors who uses the personal file. Did they see a risk when there are documents in that part of the personal file that may not have landed there if the check has been done? They said, no, we don't see a risk, so it's fine when there is a little pollution in it. So eventually the HR manager said, okay, then we stop checking all those documents and we eliminate the step of the HR. So eventually it saves us 4 FTE of full-time units to do something else, like helping other employees with a difficult question. He doesn't respond. So the last one is about endless discussion versus founded conclusion. We have a process of changing of a job position, and first the recruitment and selection process has been carried out, and then the recruitment department starts to change in our self-service system. The manager has to approve the change, and he has to complete the change in the forms. After the manager has completed the change and approves it, the recruitment department has to check the change again. If that's okay, then it goes to the HR administration to process the process and draw up a decision and place it in the personal file. There were a lot of escalation about that process. It took too long, and the HR administration said the manager took too long to make a decision. It took most of the time 2 weeks or longer. They were thinking about to send an email to the manager directly immediately after the start of the self-service change. But that makes a lot of manual work at the HR administration, and the manager had already have a lot of mails. So is that the real problem and the solution? So they asked me, can you see with the process mining tool how long it takes for the manager to approve the change? So we looked at the step again, where the manager made the decision, and we saw that it was just in 2 working days. So lesser than 2 weeks. So that was not where the problem was. The problem, what we saw, was the cases were kept at a recruitment department, saved a lot of times, and we see that cases have been sent back on several times. Yes, again. And what we saw is that there has a lot of rework in this process at the HR administration. 20% of the cases had to be corrected. So eventually we said the manager is not a problem in this process, but we have to look at ourselves. What can we do different in this process so that it goes faster? So no quick fix, but focus on the underlying issue. So they are in conversation about how they can change it. So that were the 3 examples with these contradictions. And what we can make up about it is don't always trust your gut. Be aware that bias can be all around you. Analyze and validate before drawing to conclusions. And move from pointing the finger to a mindset that makes decisions guided by facts. So that is what we have seen. And process mining makes it able for us to check the feelings, if the feelings are right. And dive deeper and see the real bottlenecks in the chain. This will make a huge impact moving forward in making process improvements and decision and deployment of capacity. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your story. Please raise your hand if you have a question for Marianne and Machteld. I will start with the first question to get us started. So one thing I was wondering, so I haven't heard much about process mining used in the human resources environment. And so I'm wondering how big the process awareness is, because being aware of how important processes are is one of the basic foundations. So is that something that you first had to develop, or was that already available?
That's a very good question. I don't think before we heard of process mining, we'd obviously never heard of it, but also when we went to camp, there was nobody talking about process mining in human resources. But we did immediately see from the examples that we saw, the practical application you can use it for. We envisioned the data we had, and we knew that it was possible to use it for our processes. But yeah, it's rare to have people like Machteld and I working within HR departments with actual knowledge of the data.
Yeah.
So we did our experiment, and when we had something to show for it, we went to several management teams. We gave a presentation about what we found, and people who weren't aware before were actually super enthusiastic. While we actually expected there to be some resistance and some fear, like, oh, we're a bit afraid of transparency, and what if, like pointing the finger at the manager, not approving something in time, what if it's actually us? And we brought it in a way like, this is good news. It means this is something that we have influence on, so we can do something about this together.
Oh,
so
nice.
We went throughout the organization with our presentation, and I've only met actual enthusiastic responses, but nobody had heard of it before.
No, and maybe it's good to say that were mostly the managers, so they want to be the information. But we also made a presentation for the employees. I gave it last week, and they were enthusiastic too, because they said, oh, that's why they made the decision. So they can understand why we do some things.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Nice, very good to hear. Thank you. Thank you very much for the nice presentation.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Okay, we'll get a microphone to you. One moment. So you can catch it. So it's yeah, we will throw it. So.
Yes, working, super.
Yes.
I keep my mouth cap on, you can understand it, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, super. Thank you very much for the presentation. I recognize a lot, although I'm not working with the police. Did you ever consider to do this project and drop the word process mining?
Can you repeat the question before you answer so that everyone can hear it?
Have we considered doing this project and dropping the word process mining?
Correct.
Like not naming it what it is?
Exactly.
Why do you ask this?
Very good. But because my experience is that when I focus a lot on the results of the use cases you mentioned, people recognize that. And if I use the word process mining, the project is a process mining project, then a lot of technicalities come to people, and also this the non-technical users get a little bit also afraid of onboarding on such a project.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think we had mentioned it indeed, and that's why people were like, oh, you two do that, you bunch of nerds, go do something with the data. And then, but actually when we shared the results, we explained the multidisciplinary aspect of it, and also, beforehand. So indeed, I do think it's a good takeaway to not call it a process mining project. I don't think we do that either. We really try to introduce it as a means to help improve a process, and, to create transparency.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next question. Okay, let's get the microphone over there.
Oh.
Hi, my name is Remco, and I have a question because I'm curious. I'm sorry for this. Is Marieke van den Burg, by instance, the one who inspired you to look at process mining?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you the NS colleague?
I
remember you now.
We know her, and I think you didn't. Well, it's an offer because we also did at NS. We checked the HR process, and what we also did was look at when you make an offer to a candidate. There's a time between accepting it and not accepting it, and we were looking at when is the moment you might want to call the candidate to check. Hey, are you still interested in the job? To reduce the risk of losing them. So,
yeah. Can you please repeat again before you answer?
That was not really a question.
No, I remember now. Yeah. So you looked at a process in recruitment, part in a process, and process mining helped you see when is a good moment to respond to a candidate before they pull back out of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember now. Yes, you're right. We had heard of it. Yeah.
Okay, just Maxime.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, very interesting. I got a question about how often are you refreshing your data? Are you still refreshing it now, or it was just a one-shot project? I mean, about process mining.
Can you repeat?
Oh, sorry, yes, right. So was this a one-time thing, or are we still using process mining and looking at new processes and data, I think is the question. We have looked at many processes. These, not all of these examples were part of the original experiment. Especially Machteld has been very busy with HR administration process analysis. And because we shared our results broadly throughout the organization, they are busy trying to implement it in the organization and find the right location for it to be harbored, since we are actually just some lone wolves in a department that we happen to be in. Nowadays, we each have a different job, and they are finding at least process mining very useful, and they want to keep using it. And they're thinking about where are the RPA. Business
Center of Excellence.
Center of Excellence to implement it there. So that's good news.
Thank you.
Okay, another question. Oh, you had a question also? Let's take that first before we go to the other side. Yeah.
Hi, thank you again for the presentation. My question is, were all the data that you use for the process mining coming from one system, or or did you need to consolidate many data sources?
Yeah.
In these examples, the data is in this example out of one system, but we have to transform the data so we could use it in the process mining tool.
Yeah.
We try to combine the data, but we are not that far.
No, the unique identifiers in one system are not the same as in the other system. So we have tried to combine a process that started in one system and continued in another. But then we're just looking at, we're just placing them next to each other, but we can't exactly follow the particular case. But it already helped immensely in gaining insight in the steps in between anyway. Yep. And the data preparation, I think in my case, was really 80% of the work.
In my case too.
Yeah.
Can I still keep the microphone and ask another question?
Yeah.
Now that you have this implemented, are you still using the process mining analysis tool to monitor if the different decisions bring any positive effects?
Yeah. Do we still use process mining to monitor the effects of the change we implemented? Yes. For many changes, I think it's still too early to check, but I was working at the front office, the service desk, and we have now actually made a result that can only be measured with process mining into a KPI, which is how many of the tickets that we process go through the happy flow. So no sending around between departments, etc. And that is now a KPI. So every quarter, I still help the service desk with determining how they're doing in that regard.
We had another process. We looked at it over several years, so different data sets, and so they can see the development in the process. So we also do that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get it over to the other side here.
Hi, so thank you also from our side for your presentation. I was wondering, how do you communicate the results? Because you showed now to us, and we all are aware of the tool, so we know the screenshots and stuff, but how do you do it for your employees or other managers?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, how do we share the results to, I guess, non-process mining experts? We had the presentation that was greatly inspired by the colleagues of the Dutch railway company, in which we explain, which is also how they inspired us to look into it and to know, like, oh, this is recognizable, we think we can do this. So we do show them very briefly what process mining is and what you need, so what is required in the data to use it. So we mention the timestamp and the unique identifier and the activity. And we show an example of the different routes, like a very simplified map, not a spaghetti, we don't want to scare anyone. But so we think it helps to explain the basics of process mining in our presentation, so that people understand what we're doing.
So for one process that you explained to us as an example, do you actually show like the screenshot out of the tool and then in the same way with the assumption and stuff?
Yes.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also explain. We always explained, but sometimes I let them see the tool, and sometimes not. It's afhankelijk. Depends
depends.
on which persons, which employees are in front of me.
Yeah, you have to tailor your approach to who you're talking to, I think. Like if someone just has a simple question, like how much time is in between this, you don't have to show them the entire process map. But if you're really diving deep with a project group, or if you're trying to convince someone in higher management to make a decision, we feel like it's important to really use this to make the argument.
Yes.
Okay.
And I always explained what can you do with it. So I gave them examples so that they can think about it. What can I ask? It helped.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, one question for Will. Let's get the microphone here.
Oh.
For an old guy, not too bad. So thanks for the very nice presentation. I have a question two questions actually that go a bit in a different direction. So often the typical applications that I see, there are many activities. So did you deliberately focus on just a handful of activities, or did you, were there just these handful of activities, or were there many more and that you left them out? Perhaps that's the first question.
So if there were many more activities in the process than you saw here.
So typically, if you start doing process mining and you extract information from an information system, you end up with, I don't know, hundreds of activities, right?
Yes, it was a real spaghetti.
Yeah, I think it was part of the data preparation. Maybe we might have imported the entire thing first, and then we're like, no, we're going to look at what do we actually need to answer this question. And
we picked out a process. Yeah. Our department has 250 processes, I think, all in that system. So we put it in and we saw a huge spaghetti. So we picked out a...
But I mean, in the processes that you showed, these were really all the steps,
yes,
right?
In this process
no other steps. So my second question is that given the organization of the police with different regions, etc., and also the fact that so many things were accepted or rejected, I think there are also differences over time. I think this is a very nice use case for comparative process mining. So, for example, we looked at, I don't know, the 8 weeks. Was there a big difference between the ones that got rejected and the ones that got accepted? Or were there huge differences between, I don't know, different regions? I think in such an organization, benchmarking can be very inspiring for people to try to improve their processes.
We do that as well. So we benchmark the different regions in the processes, not in this one, these 3, but another example we have in these examples we took the mutation number, I think it's the word, but in other cases we use the employee number, so we can see the whole journey of the employee. And there we looked at the different regions also to see is there a region we have to put attention to.
Yeah, there we saw some interesting differences between the regions, and they now got in touch to learn from each other. Yeah. So that's a very nice result.
But you can share some of these surprising things? Or is it not?
Well, yes, we can. We have the 10 regions, but we in our department we work on 3 locations. And what we saw is that one of the locations had do a lot of more rework than the other department. So that was interesting. So that they could talk at what do they different than the other 2 locations, and. That's where they are going to talk, and I don't see what they are talking about.
They were spending a lot of
time. But we give it to them, so look at that. Because we also starting a reorganization and work not on the 3 locations, but all together. So we have to make the process equal at each other.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Rudy, do we have any questions from the live stream? Can you take the microphone, but don't throw it? So.
We don't have any questions from the live stream yet, but I have one
Yes,
one question. So the central theme of the presentation, of course, is the mindset change, right? So if someone would start with process mining again, and with your experience right now, what would your advice be if you look particularly at its topic, mindset change, right? So how would you approach a manager or a sponsor to execute your first initiative? Would you do something different from the learnings you now have?
Can you please repeat the question?
What would we advise for someone who will be starting process mining, how to approach it? I think our approach has been quite successful since everybody was enthusiastic. So I would definitely say involve the people and try to, is there any issues or people are scared of losing their job because you're using this software maybe to find where you can work more efficiently and save full-time employees, like Machteld said. That doesn't mean that you're going to be out of a job. It means you can establish beforehand, we want to allocate our resources to more important things because we are still missing capacity on, for example, a customer contact. Yes. So I think that's the most important thing, is involve the people and explain how it works, maybe even too. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree to that. And the only thing I heard sometimes was, are they gonna blame me? We explained that was not the case. We don't zoom in on the person who has completed the case. So that is what we explained and kept repeating.
Yeah, there was indeed a fear, like, am I going to be honed in on, am I going to be punished for being slower at the process or doing it different? And we established beforehand that we would just look at the whole thing. We were not interested in individual cases. We were interested in a positive way of looking at it together.
Yes, and there's always a story with the numbers.
Yeah.
You can't base your conclusion on numbers only.
Yeah. Great, I think that's the perfect place to end. Let's thank Marianne and Machteld once more. Thank you.